Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining me. This is Left Bank Books presents President of Emily's List, Stephanie Schriock, who will discuss her new book, Run to Win, Lessons in Leadership for Women Changing the World. Stephanie today will be in conversation with Emily Kane, the executive director of Emily's List. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Stephanie and Emily's List, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are incredibly happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. And I think the goal of this book is to make the world a better place. So what more beautiful collaboration than this? We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a copy for you or for any of your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. We need your support. I'm Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event. So please type your questions as a comment at any point in time, and we will get to those at the end. Be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. We have so many incredible events already lined up and are adding events literally daily. About today's book, Run to Win. Hillary Rodham Clinton says, "I have long believed that women who dream big, work hard, and get back up after they get knocked down can do anything. Stephanie Schriock is one of those women. I'm so glad her thoughtful guidance is now available for women everywhere." And Michelle Lujan Grisham, the governor of New Mexico, says, "Stephanie Schriock leads the leaders." Stacey Abrams says, "Run to Win is an antidote to anxiety and a welcome call to action. I encourage every woman and a few good men to dive into Run to Win and take your turn at saving the world." And of course, from the president of Emily's List, a playbook for women changing the world in politics, business, or any arena, with a forward from Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. For the past 35 years, Emily's List has helped the campaigns of thousands of pro-choice Democratic women. But the hardest part has always been convincing more women to run. Then Donald Trump was elected, and something shifted into place. American women who were furious and frustrated were looking for a way to channel their outrage into action, united in proclaiming, "If that guy can get elected, why not me?" The day after the 2016 election, dozens of women searched out an old sign-up link buried on Emily's List website. By Thanksgiving, those dozens had grown to a few thousand, and that was only the beginning. By the end of 2018, there were nearly 50,000 women signed up to run for office, with scores more signing up each day. Run to Win is for all women who are looking to lead, organized around the steps that Emily's List coaches its candidates through, from deciding to run through celebrating victory. This book is full of essential lessons for any woman trying to succeed in a male-dominated field. Their arena is politics, but their message is universal. And Stephanie Schriock is the most qualified person to share these lessons. Not only is she a powerful figure in politics, but she's also a woman who commands respect for her astounding success as president of Emily's List and a longtime Democratic operative. Her message is uplifting and actionable. Her voice is that of your best girlfriend, walking you through what you need to consider as you make your plan. And her experience coaching the biggest female candidates in recent elections, including all of the female 2020 Democratic presidential candidates, makes her the de facto authority on the strategies women can employ to run, fight, and win, whatever their field or goal. About today's author. Raised in the copper mining town of Butte, Montana, Stephanie Schriock has been working to get Democrats elected for 25 years. Since she became president of Emily's List in 2010, she has overseen a decade of phenomenal growth in the organization, raising hundreds of millions of dollars, helping elect record numbers of women to the House and Senate, and recruiting and training hundreds more. Emily's List is now 5 million members strong. And now, without further ado, I am so incredibly happy and proud to welcome for Left Books, Stephanie Schriock and Emily Kane. Hello.
Well, hello.
Hi.
Shane,
I'm so glad you're here.
I am so glad you're here too.
Shane,
Shane,
thank you to you and
oh, sorry. Like, such a cool, great bookstore, and we've got to support our independent bookstores. Left Bank Books is such an incredible piece of St. Louis, and it's just thank you for everything that you're doing for the community and the world.
We hope to see many, many more women run for local office, for national office. We are big supporters of the mission that you do.
Well, and we look forward to coming and seeing you in person as soon as we possibly can, as Emily's List does work all across the country, including in St. Louis and in Missouri. As Shane said, my name is Emily Kane. I'm proud to be the executive director of Emily's List. And my hope for this time we have together today is really for you to experience Stephanie Schriock at her finest in conversation with a colleague and a friend. We're going to talk today about Stephanie's book, Run to Win. And I have it right here with me. And I have to say, I hope after this conversation, you also get your own copy and keep it close, because the advice in it is timeless. It's for the challenges you face today, for the ones that you might have done differently in the past, and also the ones you know you're going to face in the future. And today we're going to have a conversation with Stephanie all about the book, the lessons and the stories that are embedded in it, that are really a gift to all of us who get to keep them nearby. And Stephanie, it's such a treat to get to spend this kind of time with you today outside of our normal work day. So thank you for having me as well.
I'm so glad that you could do this, and for everybody who's listening, Emily and I get to work hand in hand, changing this country and changing the world because of it, and it's just been fabulous. She's been our executive director to my presidency for the last 3.5 years, my right hand, and just really not just a great colleague, but a really great friend. So I'm looking forward to this. This will be fun.
Oh, it's going to be fun. So Stephanie, I've known you for a while now, from the time I was a candidate for local office and running for Congress in Maine, to now working with you side by side for the last 3.5 years. But I watched you write this book with our Vice President for Communications, Christina Reynolds. I watched how you poured your heart and soul in it, both of you. I think my first question is a simple one, which is, did you always want to write a book? Or was it something about your experience at Emily's List that made you say, I've got to get this down to share it with others?
That is so true, because the truth is no. I mean, so for so many of us who work in the backgrounds of politics, I mean, Emily, there's things that that you really just shouldn't be sharing with people in American politics. You see a lot. Sometimes the sausage being made is not exactly what you want to talk about. That all being said, what really happened and was the inspiration for this book was those dozens and then thousands, and now, by the way, over 60,000 women who have signed up at Emily's List wanting to run for office, maybe not knowing what office yet, maybe still making their plan. But it started immediately after the 2016 election. And what was so great about that moment was that we were seeing women at Emily's List, an organization that's been around for 36 years, but we were seeing this huge change in diversity of women from race, geography, age, and profession, with great personal stories. I mean, it was the year, in the cycle that I learned that we had never elected a pediatrician to the U.S. House, which is insane. We had never elected a Native American woman to the United States House of Representatives until 2018. And then we elected 2 just to double down. I didn't even know former CIA agents could run for office. They can, former CIA agents, and Abigail Spanberger, who's now the Congresswoman from Virginia. So what happened, and Emily was engaged in this too, for everybody's, these stories started coming. They're like, we have to share these women's stories because they're so inspiring, they're so relatable, and they will really touch the hearts of a whole another generation of women who may be looking for some sort of path to make change and hadn't figured that out. So that's how it started. And then as the process went on, we realized that we had a huge opportunity, not just to tell the individual stories, but to also share the lessons of the process, the lessons that we've learned over decades of work of getting women through the process of deciding to run for office, to elected office, and up the ladder, but also how we were seeing some things change in a positive way over the last few years. And we believe that the lessons we've laid out in this book are really lessons that anybody can take in any aspect of their life, whether they're activists looking to make a difference, whether they're working in a corporation and want to find a way to move up the ladder, and hopefully everybody will consider running for office at some point.
You know, it's great. That's a really interesting journey to share, to think about how your inspiration was not doing the book, but telling the stories, the people whose stories you wanted others to hear. And, you know, I think for those who are listening, watching, who may not have the book yet, you know, I love some of the chapter titles that lead to these lessons you're talking about, where you have a chance to highlight these stories. Getting started, asking yourself the right questions and being honest about the answers. Break the rules, break out of the box, know your story, learn how to tell it, build your team, learn how to make the ask, grow a thicker skin, get back up. A loss is just part of your journey. Campaign joyfully, show gratitude deliberately, and celebrate liberally. I think the way you framed this up as these universal lessons is really one of the things that makes this book extra special. So when you think about the stories that you've heard from these women over these years, and the moments that I know, because I've seen you do it, that you've had to give either some tough love or a pretty tough pep talk for a woman who's running for office and is struggling with what the next step is or how hard it is, I'm wondering, what are the biggest questions that you get from women who are looking to run for office, and how do those answers show up in the book that we're all going to enjoy?
Well, and they come in a variety of ways. I mean, for a lot of the work that I've done and we've done at Emily's List is we've gone out to recruit women to run. And until 2016, until that election, I will say we spent much more time begging women to run than we did having them coming to us. That has shifted definitely in the last 5 years, which is fantastic. But there's still a ton of questions because it's still not normalized in our society that women run for office, which is crazy because there should be women running in every office in every community, period, because there are men basically running for all of this. And there are more of us, by the way, in the population. So we are still not quite there. And so in the initial conversations, I will say some of the questions, of course, really center around how you do this. You know, how do I put together a campaign? How do I file for office? How do I find staff? How do I raise the money? And I just would say, push those aside. Those are building blocks that we can provide for you. Those are skills we can train. That is not the key questions to be asking. The real questions, and we talk about this in the first chapter, as you're deciding the next steps of whatever you're doing, particularly if you're running for office, but even if you're going to go for that promotion or really try to take a risk on a whole new job, is to think about what's down in your gut and your belly, and what are the values that hold you together? Because all of these changes are hard. Change is hard. Running for office is hard. It's not rocket science. We're not going to Mars. Now let NASA do that. I think that's hard. I don't know. Maybe going to Mars isn't hard. It seems hard to me. But running for office is just putting pieces together of a puzzle and then putting yourself out there. The hard part is that you have to be a little vulnerable and you have to be willing to share yourself with your community. And so spending some time really knowing what those are, the values that you hold dear, because on the bad days, and Emily, you have been an elected official and a candidate, and an elected official for 11 years, if I remember correctly, you understand this very, very deeply, is what centers you on those hard days, on the days when you're asked, like, well, let's just admit it. You're asked, why don't you have any children? Or for those who have little kids, who's got your kids? Like, you've lost them, even though you're just working.
Right.
These tough, like, cutting questions that women get that men don't get. And there's tons of those. And you build the sisterhood, you build the friendship, you build a network. We talk about that too, but deep down, it's like, what's going to keep you grounded? And that is the key. And if you've got that, then you can do anything.
I love that answer, and I love that concept. It's something for me. I served 5 terms in the Maine legislature for 10 years, and I've won 5 elections, and I lost twice running for Congress, spectacularly and very close. Close enough for me to. I felt great the next day. Still left it all out on the field. But
to be fair, there was a gigantic snow blizzard. That's a whole other episode. To our Midwestern friends watching, huge blizzard in Maine.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation. But that's not my question. What I was going to say is, whenever I talk to women about running for office, I always say, it's not glamorous, right? Running for office is not glamorous. You have to really want to do the work. So you have to have something, and you touch on this in the book. You have to care about something bigger than yourself, or you're not going to make it, because it's difficult work, right? And I know that you have been there for so many women over the past 11 years in your role at Emily's List as president, for helping those women through those tough times to get back to that, why do I do this work, and what is it? What is it that drives me to do this work? So I think my next question is, I think about the lessons in this book, something that I think is related to what we were just talking about, which is, what is the lesson that you think women have the hardest time with when running for office in this book? Of the things you lay out here.
Interesting.
Is it grow a thicker skin, I wonder? Is it making the ask, which is slightly terrifying, having done it many times? Is it asking for help? I'm just wondering if there are things that have come up where you're saying, this one, it shows up a lot.
Well, I think there's 2 that come up a lot. And one is super easy to fix, which is, I can't ask for money. I can't ask for, and I'm like, yes, you can. You absolutely can ask for money. And we can teach you. And we will practice with you. And there's ways to do it. And we have a whole training center at emilyslist.org on fun. It's a really great, wonderful center that our staff has put together on some really great, just individual lessons, including how to fundraise. And teachable, that we can do. And you'll get there. And trust me, like I tell a story in the book about my very dear days of being a Girl Scout, selling cookies. I'm like, if little girls can go out and ask big adults to buy cookies, you can raise money to change your community. Because you're not asking because you want to go buy a latte for yourself, right? You're asking because you want to make a change. You're asking for an investment in change, and you happen to be the vessel of that investment. But you've got to just kind of visualize it differently. So that does come up a lot, but to me, that's like, come on, we can fix that. The ones that I worry about more tend to be like the thicker skin thing. Like, I don't know if I can handle it.
Mm.
Or, and these are the questions that really, like, I would get to the core of our culture, because we've sort of pounded into women, like, if I look too tough, or if I look too ambitious, then it's, doesn't look right. And so, am I tough enough? We've sort of, like, through our culture, put that on women. And I'm like, you got to pour that out. Or the women who will say, there's certainly someone better than me. I want to lose my mind when I hear that. That is ridiculous, because what we're missing at our governing tables are the voices of those who keep thinking there's somebody better than me. We need those are the people we need at the governing tables making our policy decisions. So we got to push that through. But I will say all of that, the fixable things, the harder things, Emily, and we've both had conversations with this, and this is really a problem in our current political system. It's the cost of running for office. And I don't mean the fundraising for your campaign cost. Like that you can ask and you can raise for. I'm talking about the financial cost of the time, because we so often now ask our candidates to give up their entire job, their income for a year sometimes, or 2 years in some cases, to run for office, which is completely a ridiculous way to run a political system. And it keeps out huge swaths of our country who can't afford to do that. Or even our candidates who run for the legislature, we lose a lot of candidates because they just can't afford to take the time off of work to do all of the political activities that need to be done to run, because they still have to pay rent, they still have to pay childcare, they still have to provide food. And this is something that I talk a little bit about in the book, and something I think as a society we really have to start addressing. Because if we want our government to look like the people it serves and be truly representative of all of our communities, we have to address that. Or only the rich and powerful are going to be in those seats because they're the only ones who can afford it. And organizations like ours try to bridge some of that to the best of our ability, but we've got to get our arms around that one, because that's a hard one to solve.
It is a hard one to solve, and I think it ties, that the concept ties into other things you talk about in the book that are challenges for women that they face largely because they're women, right? That goes along with that. What is the cost of running for office for women that is different than men? And you speak very eloquently in the book about learning to be authentic and how women in office are held to different standards. I love that you use an example of Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, who was mocked for drinking a beer on Instagram after she launched her campaign. Now, if you know her, you know she does like to have a beer after a long day, right? But on Instagram, it blew up a little bit in her face, and people sort of questioning whether or not it was real, and does Elizabeth Warren really drink a beer at the end of the day? And you talk about learning that yourself, about how learning in leadership roles, how to be authentic, how to know when to say, I don't know the answer to that, or this is how I feel about it. Can you speak about that? Because I think authenticity is something people are really looking for more in their politicians, and we see it play out in social media with, think about Ayanna Pressley and talking about her hair, right? And the stories that she shared. The women we know who've run for office who shared stories of dealing with breast cancer or mental health challenges or addiction in their families. The bravery they show by being authentic, you and I know, makes them stronger and makes them more relatable. But it's a tough audience out there with social media. I mean, how do you think about authenticity? And what's your advice to women who maybe are afraid to be themselves when it comes to being leaders?
It's so true, Emily. And we're in such a really challenging time because things are changing so rapidly with regard to social media in particular, where everything that you do can be caught in an instant. And there you go. Whatever you say and whatever you have said on social media for your entire life on social media. So for some of us who did not grow up with social media, we actually have we're benefited by not having a history of the dumb things we said when we were 14 years old.
I joined Facebook as an elected official at the age of 24, and I will forever be grateful that it did not exist when I was in college. So, I know what you're saying, but that's not a luxury our current round of candidates have.
No, and hopefully we'll grow up through this process in society and let it go, and just say, okay, young folks do crazy things like we all did. That's just part of the way. But your point about showing vulnerability is really important, because we are demanding authenticity from our elected officials. Now, for previous generations so I'd say sort of baby, so I'm a Gen Xer. 47 years old, proudly 47, about to be 48 years old. And so I'm sort of in the cusp of these two worlds. Baby boomer women had to break through doors so I could walk through them. They had to crash through ceilings so I could stand in the sun. And they did. And when I became campaign manager for John Tester, who's now a United States Senator in Montana, there wasn't a question that I was a woman running his race. That had already been broken. Now I was in the next generation of it, but thankfully a generation of women came before me. And when they went through this, they were told that basically they had to be perfect and to show no weakness and to never say you don't know the answer. And I have had incidences where I have said, I don't know the answer to that, but I will get back to you. And older women will say, you're the president of Emily's List. You can't say that. Like the whisper. I was like, no, I need to be who I am, and I need to be honest and transparent about it. And so on one hand, we've got this sort of stewed misogyny and that we even do to each other. On the other hand, we go out there, we share our vulnerabilities, which we've seen so much more in the last 4 years. And still on social media, like Elizabeth Warren, can get attacked for it. Because who's defining your authenticity? And all I can say to the candidates is, you just gotta be you. Because yes, there is going to be some group on social media that's going to try to define you as inauthentic, because it's a great way to break down any candidate, particularly a woman. But we just, as women, need to show our version of leadership, and we need to show society that it looks a little bit different than men's, and we need to be able to be who we are, which means we have to bring our whole self in. We have to talk about, as Lauren Underwood, the congresswoman from Illinois, talked about her heart issues as a child and her pre-existing conditions. 25 years ago, I'm not sure we would have ever even recommended that she talk about her previous health problems, or anybody who had ever gone through breast cancer. We would have literally said, you probably shouldn't bring that up unless it comes up. MJ Hager, who ran both for Congress and Senate in Texas, who's an amazing hero, a war hero who fought to ensure that women had access to fighting for their country, wounded herself, has tattoos all over her arm in honor of her wounds and her sacrifices to this nation. And I will tell you, in the 1990s, I actually told a man to cover up a tattoo because nobody was ready to see those. And she was like, I'm going to break out of the box. I'm going to do it my way because this is my authentic self. That's what we all have to be doing. And then we have to be open to the differences that brings.
It's a really interesting sort of story over time. And I like to think of it when we're at the Emily's List offices, and we haven't been there in a while because of the pandemic. When we're at the Emily's List offices, we have so many pictures on the wall of women over time who've been elected with the support of Emily's List. And I'm always struck by how you kind of have the phase where it was clear everyone was told to cut their hair short, or you had to wear a blazer, or you had to dress a certain way. When I think about the last few years of the way women are physically showing up as one of the markers of authenticity becoming more and more present, right? Where they're dressing as themselves, right? I mean, when I was running for Congress in 2014, I had to get glasses during that campaign for real so I could read. And I remember our campaign getting calls, including from some reporters saying, did you get Emily's glasses to try to, make her look older or smarter? And my campaign manager was like, no, she just needs to be able to read the teleprompter. But it's a trite example. But when I think about how women are showing up, and you think about the image of women on the floor of the House, all dressed in white, right, for past State of the Union, and how they show up as themselves, each one individually, no longer the concept in Emily's List that we often talk about is that, not all women are the same. And that's a novel concept for women in politics. People sort of say, well, women voters must all be the same, women electeds must all be the same, and that's not true. So all that to say to my next question to you is, how has women's leadership changed since you got into politics? Because you've managed a lot of races. You've going even back to your Girl Scout days, have been no stranger to getting out the vote or the cookie buying, if you will. So how for you have you seen women's leadership change in politics over your career?
It's been, it has been really fabulous, though I will say we still have so much work to do. When I started in the mid 1990s, really started my career, I'm thinking about those pictures on the wall of Emily's List. It was like the political bob. Like they all had the same hair. I had that hair too. The fact that we're all sporting long pandemic hair right now, which is very, very funny, but we wouldn't be wearing long hair if it was 25 years ago. And it's just, I know that seems like a minor thing, but it really was like, look as closely to the picture that people think an elected official looks like, which is a white male. And so I had the navy suits and the black suits, right? And probably a really bad brown suit, which was a huge mistake. Like we should have never have had those suits at all. And at least we're in the pantsuit era, which I like. But now, women had to fight to wear pantsuits. And then women basically had to fight to wear skirts again. And now women can wear whatever they want to wear, pantsuits or skirts, jackets or shirts. Bare arms, not bare arms. Thank you, Mrs. Obama, for that one. So, and it seems trite to talk about it this way, but what all of this is really doing is showing up in lots of different ways. There is a different kind of leadership that is being uplifted in this because of the diversity of women who are stepping up to run. Black women lead differently than Latinas, than AAPI community, than white women, but they also come together in community to work and find solutions in a really powerful way. And the more women and diverse women from diverse professions and diverse geographies we see, the better we'll all understand that there are different types of leadership. And even seeing Nancy Pelosi, our speaker who holds this all together in the House of Representatives, I think she is, let's think about the two stalwarts of women's leadership for a long time. There were two, really, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, right? If you think it, two white women of similar ages. And they even are very different in how they do things, very different in how they interact with folks, very powerful in how they do that. And they are very, very, very different, both of which have taught me a lot. And I've taken bits and pieces of both of them. Now I get to take bits and pieces as I continue to grow my own leadership from Congresswoman Sharice Davids, who's one of the first Native American women ever to serve in Congress from the other side of your state, over in out of Kansas, but just outside of Kansas City. I mean, this is what's so cool about the diversity of what's happening. Congresswoman Cori Bush, just in your own backyard, who's bringing her own presence and voice every time there's a new woman from a differing background, we are all stronger. And it is showing that there is a wildly different way to lead. And that's what makes us strong.
I think that's great. And the other thing I think is an interesting angle here is that women's leadership is showing up beyond issues that are traditionally cast as for women, right? And I remember when I, even serving in the legislature, sort of an assumption, well, there really weren't any women on the utilities committee in the legislature in Maine. When I was there, we added some, which was great. But there's sort of these women must want to serve on health and human services and in education. Well, of course, women do, and they should. They also want to serve on, security and intelligence and transportation, right? They want to serve on committees that are leading on things like public lands. Women's issues are actually,
everywhere.
All issues, include the economy, include taxes. And I think we saw that on display no more than in the presidential race last year with the primary. And because you were working on this book while that was going on, and the backdrop of Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand and Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren and all of the women on the stage running for president, it really, again, proves that point. That women's leadership is broad and diverse in and of itself. And I think at Emily's List, with more than 40% of women we've elected to Congress in the last 36 years being women of color, is just such a point of pride, I know, for you and for all of us at Emily's List. It honestly, and we're not slowing down anytime soon. Stephanie, I want to switch the mode of this conversation for a little bit, because a big part of that I know, because I know you personally, of writing this book was not only sharing lessons of bouncing back after a loss, something I know about a lot, of bouncing back personally, professionally. And for you, you had your own bouncing back to do while writing this book. Can you tell us about that and sort of how that intensified that lesson for you?
Of course, and Emily, who was by my side through this entire endeavor. So Christina Reynolds and I, Christina, as we noted, our co-author of this book and our vice president of communications, who's also a saint in keeping us on deadline and writing this book. She's just super, super talented. We had just started writing and had really only drafted the first couple of chapters when in September of 2019, I had a stroke. And thankfully, as I'm standing here, doing very well. So I'm so grateful. Thank you. Good healthcare and good friends and family who were with me from the very beginning, including Emily. But it did slow everything down. And I had to take some time to pause, even though we were in the middle of an election cycle, a very, very important one. We were in the middle of this book, and and I'm part of my job is to show that we're doing the right things and everything's going really well. And here I am, knocked out of the game for a period of time, and as a little angry about it, to be honest, because I was like, what? How did this happen? But I realized that, one, you've got to have good people around you. Like, you just have to have good people around you. And sometimes those are family members, or the family that you make, and the friendships and the colleagues and the staff that you put together. You've got to have a support group for when things happen. If it's one bad day, or in my case, it was a couple bad months, we got through it all together. But the other thing about this, and I will be really honest, because it just also shows how challenging this environment still is for women. I wasn't sure I was going to put the story in the book. Even though the stroke happened while writing the book, we had a debate through a few of us. Emily was part of this conversation about whether or not I should be that vulnerable, and would it hurt the organization if folks knew that their leader had a stroke. Was that going to be a challenge for us moving forward? Was I going to look like I had any deficits? Those questions, we actually had a conversation about that, because they're still in the back of our heads in this misogynistic society that we are in. If I show weakness, is it going to hurt me and thus the issue I care about? And here we are writing a book saying, show that weakness, be transparent, be authentic. And I was like, we have to do this. We have to be honest.
We had to do it.
We had to do it. And it was totally the right thing to do, because I can say it wasn't easy, and it also still isn't even easy for me to read those pages because it's so personal. But I also, I've had folks come and reach out to me after events like this, sharing their story about their stroke or their story about their healthcare, and having that debate and discussion. As a woman, are you really open to telling the world that maybe something happened and you've overcome it? And you got to overcome it. And here's the thing, we're tough. We overcome things all the time. But it's just really amazing that that's even for someone who every day is telling women, like, you can do this and you can overcome these challenges and we will find a way, that I even needed somebody else. I needed a group of friends, a group of girlfriends to tell me the same thing. And that's just where we are, but it works.
Well, what I love about this, and I know we're going to go to audience Q&A in a minute, but what I love about it, and having been a literal witness to it with you, is that it's a perfect example of how you are living the lessons that you are putting in this book. That, that you are, and it gets back to sort of that being joyful in your determination, being joyful in your work, coming out on the other side of it, truly stronger, truly healthier, is really an example that I'm grateful, and let me say thank you to you for sharing that vulnerability in this book, because I think it only makes the stories more credible. It makes the lessons more credible, and it will only make the inspiration bigger for even more women that are going to read this book, and men should read this book too. I should say that, and men are welcome to read this book and then pass it along to a woman you think should run for office. So Shane, I think it's probably time for the audience Q&A. I could keep talking to my friend Stephanie for the next 15 minutes and keep asking her questions, but I know we have an audience that may want to get in on the action.
And I could honestly keep listening to this for hours. So inspiring, like as someone who has seen friends run for office, I know that even the men that I've seen run for office would get so much out of this book because they are such feminists and in such support of women. So I think that it is very important for anyone to read this book that is even remotely interested. And I hope that everyone watching today is inspired to either consider running for office, consider like making a donation to Emily's List, just like get that idea in your head that you are someone that can do this and can change the world. I want to start with my question. So with kind of the last several years, we've seen people go from being a bartender, go from being a nurse and community organizer, go from being these positions that are not lawyers and people like who have been kind of fast tracking their way into politics. We've seen these people that are similar to like us, like the people that we see every day, run successfully for office. And I'm wondering how you convince those people that have these innate leadership qualities. How do you get to those people and how do you convince them?
Well, the good news has been that they have found it in themselves, particularly in the last 4 years, to get over that first question, that first hurdle of am I the one who should step up and run? Which is why we've seen such diversity in particularly professions of folks that are stepping up and willing to take this on. And that was very much, I don't like to give him credit for this, because I actually think this is not a silver lining of Donald Trump. I think this this energy was sitting there in 2016 in women across the country as I was traveling campaigning for Hillary Clinton. And women were so nervous about whether or not she would win, if this country was really ready for this moment. And you could feel this emotion. It was like they would bring me into the corners of rooms and go, do you really think this is going to happen? Like, that's into these hushed voices. And I will be honest, yes, I thought it was going to happen. I thought she was going to win. Our boys thought she was going to win. So I too was heartbroken about the whole thing and had to find inspiration. And where I found inspiration was, in fact, these great women who stepped up to run. But our job is, for those who are willing to take that next step, is to do some, we'll do some basic trainings if they need training. We can talk through what they're bringing. But so much of politics it's about people, and it's about listening, and it's about sharing your story to connect with others. And everything else can come out from that basic just set of values. If you are willing to listen to your community, understand what's going on to the best of your ability. And the best way to do that is to also show a little vulnerability, so you build that connection. That's the core of this. Everything else, we can media train, we can speech coach, we can find somebody to write a speech. You don't even have to know, you don't have to write a speech. There are people out there who are willing. There are so many people out there willing to help you if you want to run. There's also so many people in your life who want you to succeed in so many other ways. So you also have to be able to ask for help. And that's it. But you're right. Just think about having those wonderful voices with completely different backgrounds in office now. The mothers. I mean, I think about Lucy McBath out of Georgia. Shane, I noticed your dear. We have lots of love for Stacey Abrams and this too. So I saw that when you did at the beginning. We're like, we feel the same way. We love Stacey Abrams. She was our very first Gabrielle Giffords Rising Star Award winner at Emily's List when she was the rising minority leader in the State House. So we've been with her for a long time and think the world of her, and just talk about innate leadership. There's folks who got it, and then there's folks like Stacey Abrams, which is like a whole another level. But Lucy McBath, who is a new congresswoman, won in 2018 from Georgia, she lost her son to gun violence because he was playing his music too loud. And she was willing to, in the toughest of way, in a just moving, extraordinary way, change her entire life trajectory to fight to prevent additional gun violence in this country. And she does it every day now from the floor of the United States House of Representatives. She was a flight attendant. She was a breast cancer survivor. She was a mom who lost her son to gun violence because he was playing his music too loud. And that changed her entire trajectory. And thus there is her voice there in the House. In fact, she wrote a piece yesterday about how we have to stop just talking about gun violence. We got to do something about it. She's still a huge voice and will ultimately, I believe, make the changes we need. It's really something that's what this is all about.
Shane, it's so interesting. And Seven, your answer is just right. And I think that so speaks volumes about the lessons in the book and also the overall work of Emily's List, which is really about changing who's in elected office so you can see yourself there, yeah. Right? I mean, when we think about the number of firsts that Emily's List has been a part of at the state and local level, right? In Missouri was Lauren Arthur, who became the youngest woman to ever serve in the Missouri Senate, for example, right? We talked about Stacey Abrams. We think about the firsts in Virginia, which in 2017 and 2019 really showed us that there was a brighter light at the end of the tunnel electorally across the country when we elected the first Latinas to the Virginia House of Delegates. When we think about in Wisconsin, we elect the first openly bisexual woman to the state legislature. You know, we have so many firsts for women of color, for transgender women, for women from different backgrounds, different careers, different, you know, socioeconomic statuses, that when they tell their stories, which is something, Stephanie, you focus so clearly on in this book, every time someone hears that story, they think, oh, maybe I could do that too. You know, and Stephanie, there's a question that's come up here from a woman named Marianne, who's asking about Kamala Harris and exactly this idea. You know, and for those of you who don't have the book yet, I'll give you a fun fact, which is the foreword is by Vice President Kamala Harris. I think Shane mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again. Self-promotion.
Vice President.
But to be clear, she was asked and agreed to write this foreword well before she was the vice president. And that's because she's someone that Emily's List has been with for a long time. We were with her when she ran for DA, when she ran for AG, when she ran for Senate, and then for VP. So the question is about what the impact of her being the VP will be and is, right? What is that impact in real time in 22 for women who are running and in the longer term?
And it's multifold. And part of it is you don't really, it's hard to know immediately what the impact is. But I can tell you, watching women even just win statewide for the first time in a state that's never had a woman elected statewide, we almost always see more women run for office following that. Look at California, that had 2 women senators for 2 decades. Washington State, where we've had 2 women senators for decades, and a woman governor. At New Hampshire, where we've had 2 women senators now, both of which were governors, and we have huge numbers of women who are running in these states. So we will see a surge of women inspired by Vice President Harris across all segments of society, because we don't just have the first woman vice president of the United States. We have the first African-American vice president of the United States. We have the first South Asian American president of the United States. And so to see all of the beauty of her diversity is really, really important. And so I think that inspiration, that role modeling is really important. The other thing is that we still live in a country where well over 20 of our states have never had a woman governor, ever. Many of them haven't had women senators. Missouri is not one. You had Claire McCaskill in place. In fact, one of the reasons Emily's List got started was because in 1982, a woman by the name of Harriet Woods ran for United States Senate in Missouri and could not get the resources from the Democratic Party to win. And she ran out of money at the very end of the election, lost by less than 2 percentage points. And our founders, including Ellen Malcolm, were engaged in supporting her race and realized that they were never going to get any women elected in their own right to the US Senate unless there was some sort of funding mechanism to help them. So the history of all of this really goes through Missouri and that Harriet Woods Senate campaign. So it's the recent first, but it's also just the first, the first woman we got elected to the US Senate in her own right on the Democratic side was Barbara Mikulski in 1986. Now that was a long time ago, but it's not 1886. It was 1986. It was well over 230 years of American democracy before we could say, there's a woman elected in the Senate. So it is really going to be a testament. One other thing I want to bring up about the vice president, which I think is really important, that we will not see, but is happening every day, is that for the first time ever, there is a woman, an African-American woman, a South Asian American woman in these major policy conversations, from handling the pandemic to international affairs, from dealing with the economy to how we're going to deal with Russia. And her voice and her perspective and her experience is in that room with President Joe Biden. And he has made it clear that they are partners and that she is going to be by his side in these conversations, that is game changing for how our policies will incorporate a whole other set of perspectives that have never been in there at that level coming from that high of an elected official. So that is very, very powerful in what that means for the policies coming in the next 4 years.
All right, so my next question, I think probably the last question too. How do we get old white men to pass the baton and be mentors to these younger women to be the next generation of policymakers?
Well, I'm not sure I know exactly the magic formula for
Maybe we'll find out soon.
There are good men out there, and I'm very grateful to the good men and the good white men who will reach down and pull somebody up, and particularly pull women and women of color up along the way, or people of color up along the way. We need more and more of that. And for all of us in leadership, we just have to remember that there are generations coming up behind us that they're amazing. Like, they are energetic and they're smart and they're creative and they're coming fast and they're big and there's lots of them. And so it's for all of us to think about making room and space for all of their voices too. So I would just encourage everybody in leadership to think about how you continue your work. And there's lots of different ways to be leaders. I say that gently, because after 11 fabulous years at Emily's List as the president, and only the second ever president of Emily's List, I'm stepping down at the end of March. And I'm doing that because I've been looking for new opportunities, and I want to see what else I can do after this incredible experience and how much I've grown because I work with all these great women. I feel like a completely different and stronger leader than I did 11 years ago. And I want to make sure somebody else has that opportunity too, because that's how we keep expanding the power and movement for women, and we make change.
Well, I want to thank both of
why
you.
It's so fun to work with Stephanie every day.
Thank you, Emily.
Very easy to see.
We have a good time. We do good work, and we do it joyfully.
We work hard.
Very importantly, we do it joyfully because
we do.
We have some fun. And Shane, we hope you have some fun in all this too, because what you do in bringing people together for discussion, debate, so critically important. So thank you for having us. We're so honored to be part of your programming, and just thank everybody who joined us today. This was really fun.
Yeah. Marianne said, thank you. I'm giving your book for a student of mine from about 15 years ago who ran and lost in the fall, but is running again. So
yes!
That's the important part.
Yay!
Yay! Yeah. Just a step in the process.
Yep.
Just a step in the process.
Well, I want to thank both of you. This has been a really inspiring conversation. The work you do is fantastic. So if you haven't been thanked today for the incredible work that you do, I would like to thank both of you. It's really been such a pleasure to listen to just such incredible, inspiring words. And I know that this book will find the readers that it needs to find to inspire the people that it needs to inspire. And I'm really hopeful for that and thankful that you wrote it. So
well, thank you. Thank you, Shane, so much. And Emily, thank you as always.
Thank you.
All right, and to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We have a ton of great programming lined up for you, a ton of incredible events. So be sure to check out our events calendar, and hope to see you again really soon. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.